Well, thanks so much.
Hi, Lauri.
Um, how are you?
Good afternoon, evening, wherever I find you guys, all of us. It's good to see you all again.
You
Sorry
as
about
well.
your dad.
Thank you.
May his neshama have an aliyah.
Amen.
It's a very significant day. I mean, I guess Lowell mentioned that he passed on Lag BaOmer.
Yeah.
That's a heck of a day. We can have a whole podcast on that.
Yeah.
Um, well, it's interesting that we're talking on this day that you. It just so happens that you're here on the Yortzeit. Speaking of Yortzeit, so passing the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And as we know, the Lubavitch Rebbe, when he was still with us physically, he um, instituted or he influenced or he inspired a president. I don't remember if it was Reagan or Bush's father to institute Education Day in America. And one of the things, and Frank and I were just mentioning this yesterday, kind of in a comedic way. There was a Rabbi Goldstein, there was the Poway shooting in Chabad of
Mhm.
Poway, who lost his finger, and he came on Anderson Cooper on CNN, and I guess Anderson Cooper basically asked him, is there anything you'd like to say to America, to the country? And he basically said, the Lubavitcher Rebbe would always say that the children need to, before each day starts, before the class starts, they need to have like 2 or 3 minutes of silence, moment of silence to think about, just God, to think about why they're here, to think about their neshama, their soul, the purpose of life. As much as a young child can think about the purpose of life, whatever that means to them. Um, with that said, I just read it was a question posed by, I don't know if you know who Gad Saad is. He's a Lebanese Jew, professor in Canada. He wrote a book recently called The Parasitic Mind about the whole woke thing. And he basically asked the question, I'm just paraphrasing. He asked like in a very long way, I'm just giving you the short version. Is there something we can do to reverse all this stuff that these people have done, or is the West gone? And there was somebody responded in the comments, actually, and then I thought of you. They said, you don't understand. This is not merely a battle of ideas. This is like somebody's funding this war, namely China and Islamists, Islam. So, with that said, maybe tell us what's going on that front, because from what I can see, with all the stuff on campuses, these kids are cooked. By the time they get to the campuses, they're cooked. The campuses are being funded by Qatar and China and Russia.
Yeah.
And now we see what we see.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Education is the key. And we have lost 3 generations that we know of right now who do not have a proper knowledge of American history, and those Judeo-Christian values that our nation was founded upon. And unfortunately, over the last couple of months, we saw some movement in Congress with Virginia Woolf, who is the chairwoman of the U.S. House Education and Workforce Commission. And she held a couple of hearings on K through 12 education. And during one of those hearings, I was unable to attend to speak because I was in Israel. And then there was the next occasion, the second hearing was during the time of the week that my father passed. So there is supposed to be another hearing, and we're pushing for another hearing by the Education and Workforce Commission to review the textbooks. Because initially in the first 2 hearings, they addressed the issue they are not acknowledging. Finally, after over a decade of shouting from the rooftops, so, hoping somebody in authority would listen, that our kids have been indoctrinated in K through 12 classrooms through curriculum, through textbooks, specifically McGraw-Hill and Pearson Publishers, which McGraw-Hill is a subsidiary of Pearson, because Pearson has bought up all the smaller textbook publishing outlets. And so they don't change the name, they keep the same name. So no one catches on that there is that they have a,
Monopoly.
yes, they have a monopoly on our children's education. So I have recently been working with Congresswoman Mary Miller, because she is very concerned about the anti-Semitism that she has seen arise. And she's been following what we've been doing with the textbooks and the curriculum for some time now. And she has gone to the chairman as well as other members of that committee and asked them to please hold hearings on the publishers, that's where we're going to see the propaganda. That's where we need to start, because that's going to lead us to the money also that is funding all of this. And she just told me this morning that her team did research, and they don't see Pearson as the problem. And of course, Pearson has hidden their propaganda in their curriculum by selling off portions of their education arms. And unfortunately, it's hard unless you are trained to look for and where to look for the propaganda and where it's coming from and who's publishing it. We're gonna get responses like the members of that committee who said, well, we looked into it, we didn't see anything. Pearson sold a portion of the publishing house, their education arm, to a wealth management group out of Los Angeles called Nexus. And we can't get much information out of Nexus, unfortunately, to try to draw the parallels. But we know that Pearson is behind this. We also know that Pearson's shareholders include the Islamist governments of Qatar, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Libya. And one of the ways that these other countries kind of hide their impact in education and within Pearson is they invest a certain amount of money into the Libyan Investment Authority, and they give the money under the guise of LIA, and then LIA helps to fund the propaganda, just like Qatar. We see the same thing coming, and Qatar is kind of new to this education issue, because back a decade ago when we were first doing the research, Qatar was not part of it. Qatar may have not the K through 12. Qatar may have been a part of the higher ed, but they were never involved in K through 12, but now they're into the K through 12 curriculum. So this is a huge problem, because after having 3 generations go through the public school system across the country and convincing the Department of Education, the federal Department of Education, which is not supposed to have any ties to education on the state level, they were able to work their way into K through 12 classrooms in the 50 states across the country by coming up with programs like Bridges, which was about a decade ago, Common Core, which is more familiar to us. It's these programs that they infiltrated, and of course, what came out of those programs was the CRT, critical race theory, the social emotional learning, all of the garbage that we see that we're indoctrinating and undermining our children's minds. We're not educating children anymore, we're indoctrinating them. And therein lies the problem. So now I have to try to convince Congressman Miller to stand her ground on this and let us fight with her to try to push this issue. What we need to do is we need to launch a massive nationwide media campaign exposing Pearson publishers and their collaborators like Qatar. The way that Qatar has infiltrated the education system on K through 12 is, of course, by funding the Middle East Studies programs or history programs or civics programs on the higher ed campuses. And as they fund these programs on these higher ed campuses, they're also funding the professors. They're bringing in the professors to teach the garbage, to teach the disinformation, and they're teaching our next generation of educators. So the next generation of educators are coming through the system. They've been indoctrinated. And when they go to the classroom, K through 12, to teach the students, they're teaching, they're passing on to the next generation the propaganda that started there. So Qatar, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Libya, all of these countries who have invested heavily in Pearson and Pearson's subsidiaries are now able to benefit. It's all working together. That information is in the classroom, and the information is being reinforced in the minds of our kids. And that's why we have kids who are marching in the streets with pro-Hamas terrorist groups, siding with the Palestinians, siding with terrorists, because we have taught our kids, and I'll give you a great example of propaganda that caused us to get involved in the education issue. Because for those of you who are not familiar with proclaiming justice to the nations, that's the mission that I am, or the organization that I am president of. It is a Christian Zionist organization. We focus on combating anti-Semitism. That is ultimately our goal, is to combat anti-Semitism. So wherever anti-Semitism rears its ugly head, whether it's through curriculum, whether it's rallies, we are there to raise awareness and expose the people, the anti-Semites. Well, the content of a textbook, a Pearson published textbook, had a quote that legitimized Palestinians blowing themselves up in a Jerusalem restaurant because they were waging a war against Israeli government policies and army actions. When I saw the content of this quote and where the quote was positioned in the textbook, how it was positioned, I knew immediately that what they were doing was they were trying to make our next generation of children sympathetic to the Palestinians. Because the way it was presented makes a child who isn't knowledgeable about what's happening in the Middle East, makes this child feel sympathetic to the poor Palestinians. It's conditioning the kids before they ever get to the university. And that's when they become mobilized and activated by these groups that we see on the campuses across the country. So it's critically important that, and this is what we're calling on Congress to do, they need to launch a full and thorough investigation. They need to call for an emergency review of the curriculum being used in the United States across the country, all 50 states. They need to call on the 50 states to launch this investigation to see the content that our children are being subjected to. Because if they will see the content, they will hopefully, God willing, be able to think critically, as I did, and say, well, this is a problem. The other issue about this quote that I found in this Pearson published textbook was that there was no picture of the description of this statement that was being made. I knew exactly what the statement was referring to. We all remember the Sparrow Pizzeria bombing. It was the launch of the Second Intifada. That was the quote that was being referenced. It was referencing the terrorists who blew themselves up in this pizzeria because we all remember at the time, this is how they have to fight their war because they don't have weapons and they don't have a military like the IDF has. So they failed to put a picture or an image of the carnage that resulted from that incident that was being referred to in the textbook. Had they put the image of the carnage that, and there were plenty of images because we all remember seeing them flashing on the screen during the evening news. Had they put a picture, it would have changed the perspective or the perception of this terrorist that wouldn't happen without an image to tie this incident to. When we found that quote, we launched a nationwide campaign to expose what was being done. And to our benefit for doing that, we were hearing from parents and citizens from other states who were making their kids bring their children's textbooks home, and they were finding similar content. That is why we now see our kids engaging in anti-Israel rallies and hatred of the Jews, covering their faces with keffiyehs, because these kids have been indoctrinated. They've already been influenced. And so now these kids are going to become adults, and they're going to share these things as they have children and have their families. They're going to share the same information. We have to stop. We all know that the way to stop the anti-Semitism is through education. Our next our next documentary film is on the Inquisition. And Lowell, I'd love to hear your thoughts, or, you know, anyone else who knows about what's happening in Portugal right now, if anyone's following, because it looks like Portugal is starting to turn back. They've revoked it. They've revoked the Spanish law. They're not accepting any more descendants of the Sephardim that they were. Spain was doing it too, and I believe they are no longer allowing dual citizenship in their country to allow the Jews or the descendants of those Jews who fled, like my ancestors, my great-grandparents, who left the Azores to come to the United States. And, you know, just looking at what's happening in Portugal, you've got the socialist, communist group that has taken over. And there's been a rabbi who's been arrested. They've got him under house arrest. I don't know if he's still under house arrest, but I know this happened last year. He was arrested. He was accused of selling these certificates of dual citizenship illegally. And there's members of the Jewish community, or a particular member, who contacted a member of the Jewish community in Portugal to ask if there's any truth to these stories about what's being told. And the person that opposed the stories and said, this isn't true, I take issue with the comments being made here, it kind of shocked me, because I was sent a dossier of information, articles written about what is going on in Portugal. And I'm planning to travel, God willing, to film interviews in Portugal, specifically in Porto, where it seems that this activity is going on. So, you know, all of our countries have got to be, we've got to educate the next generation. And if this activity is going on now in Portugal, what other countries are we going to start seeing this happen to? So we've got a lot of work ahead of us. And unfortunately for us right now, we're being challenged because people don't see the importance of the work that we are doing. And if we don't take control of K through 12 education, we are going to lose our country. There is going to be no republic because our children don't know. Our children have no clue what a republic is. We keep telling our kids we're a democracy. We're not a democracy. We're a republic. And our nation, as we all know here, our nation was founded on the Torah of Moses. Our whole structure and form of government came out of the Torah. That should be taught in every classroom across this country. That way the kids will know the amazing contribution that the Jewish community has made to this nation. We wouldn't be a nation without Haim Solomon, who was a close friend of George Washington. He bankrolled the American Revolution for Washington, and he died without a dime to his name. Our government never paid Haim Solomon back for the sacrifice he made. He gave it all. But Florida, thank God for DeSantis, is teaching that. It is required because of the work that we did, because Governor DeSantis had the foresight. He allowed us to include in the standards that became law in the state of Florida that we teach our kids the role the Hebrew Bible played in our founding. Tennessee has followed Florida in passing those standards, but and there are other states that we need to target, like Ohio, Texas, Arizona, and the rest of the 50 states. But unless people understand that, and we have young parents now who have their kids in K through 12, who are not informed, are not looking at textbooks and curriculum that their children are using. They don't even know this history because they haven't been taught this history. And had I not done this research, I would not have known that myself. But that's the key to combating the anti-Semitism. Because we show, it's the Judeo-Christian values, the Judeo-Christian principles that our nation was founded upon that make us so unique. And I agree with Lowell that those who are trying to push this anti-Israel agenda they're being confronted with having to deal with those Christians who, because they are descendants of the tribes, they don't know it, but there's that pull in their heart to Israel and to the Jews. And even though they do, like Lowell said, even though some of them embrace replacement theology, they won't go so far as to allow the Jews to be marginalized again and allow for another Holocaust. They'll draw a line in the sand. They'll only go so far. And those are the people that we're trying to reach. It's why we produce the media that we do. It's why we're targeting Portugal and Spain, because of the Hispanic and Latino community, because many of the Latino and Hispanic community, many in the community who are Catholic and some even Protestant, do not know that they're descendants of the Anusim or the Conversos. As I was doing the research in Portugal, I noticed as I was reading this dossier that was sent to me, that a lot of the names of the political leaders are all my cousin's surnames. To my horror, as I look at these names, the Sousas, the Silvas, the Madeiras, I think to myself, these people have no clue. They're fighting against their own. They're turning their back on their own, and they don't know it. I don't think these people in Portugal, this generation of Portuguese, even know what the Inquisition was about. It's probably not even taught in their schools. And I haven't done enough research. I mean, this is ongoing. But we've got to tell the story, because this is an important part of the community. It's very important to the Israeli government. We know that the Israeli government has a whole ministry focused on the Sephardim and finding them and bringing them back. It's the other half of Judah that has to return when all the exiles come back from the four corners of the earth. So I think it's important for us to not only, reach the general public with what happened with the Inquisition, but we're seeing now, like what's happening in Portugal, we're seeing a similar trend to what we saw leading up to the Inquisition. So that's the totality of what we're doing so far with education. And like I said, this is the most important battle. There are a lot of different battles, a lot of different battlefields in this war. But to me, this is essential because they're our kids are the next generation. And if we don't pass truths, historical truths, biblical truths to our kids, then we're basically wiping out the Republic of the United States. So that's where we are, guys.
Lauri, I wish I could help you more in what you're trying to do. But it seems like it's tied into what's going to happen in the next election.
Yeah.
President Trump, he said if he gets in, right, he's gonna eliminate the Department of Education.
Mm-hmm.
Get rid of these teachers, because if you change the textbooks, they're still going to teach what they want to teach because they're all Marxists. Sure. So it's everything that you're talking about seems completely dependent on what occurs in this upcoming election.
Yes. Mm-hmm. It's critical. I know that in here in Florida, early voting has already started. And people need to, and there's school board races. And of course, those are the races that we're focused on, because those school board races, ultimately, it's the school board, the local school board, that determines the curriculum that's being used. If we have a school board that thinks outside of the box and doesn't just take the propaganda, and you have teachers within that school district, because the teachers are required to teach by law. They have to teach the standards that have been passed and adopted. The school board members, knowing that, have to make sure that the curriculum that they're using is in compliance with the state standards that were adopted. Like, for example, teaching about the Hebrew. In fact, if you remember, it was a couple years ago when we got that language included, there was a lot of pushback in the media that, we were going to start teaching the Bible to the kids. But you see how quickly everything kind of just died down. They couldn't do anything about it. This was state law, and now this was required teaching. So each teacher and each school district has to report back to the Department of Education here in Florida, letting them know how they met teaching the standards. So there is a gatekeeper. And we have to make sure that the teachers are in compliance. Now, they may be teaching the standards, but then they may be throwing their opinions in as well. And this also becomes a part of the problem. One of the ways that DeSantis is trying to alleviate that is, number one, he's giving teachers who choose to teach civics according to the standards. I mean, they have to anyways, according to the standards. But what he said was, anybody who wants to teach these civics, that he will pay them an extra $3,000 a year. So there were a lot of teachers who saw an opportunity to make some extra money, and with good intentions, to teach those standards, like what was just passed. So that's one way of doing it. The other, he's targeting the schools of higher ed, the teaching schools of higher ed, to make sure that what's being taught to the teachers how to teach children K through 12 is being communicated that those teachers in those universities are also teaching these up and coming teachers accurately. So, and they're required to teach this way with these new standards. So DeSantis is on the road, but it's again, it's a long, drawn out process. And we have to, as somebody once told me, the problem with education in the United States it's a major national security threat, and it is. Because if we don't have a generation to pass the baton to, this republic to, then again, we can kiss the country goodbye. America as we know it will no longer be the United States of America.
I agree, Lauri.
So elections are coming up. One thing that we all can do is find out what district you live in, and then find out who's running for school board for that district. And also talk with the incumbent who's trying to keep that seat and ask them what they think about, especially if you're in Florida. What do you think about DeSantis and his, his policies and his laws that he's passed on standards and on education? But you can ask that of any school board member in any county across the country. It's very important to get to know who those school board members are and find out if they're on your side. If they're not on the side of our kids and the future of the republic, then we obviously need to find the candidate that's going to unseat them and back them up.
Lauri, you mentioned gatekeepers. Where my family lives, we just recently had, I think it was 6 months ago or a year ago, whatever this was, last November, a Board of Education elections. And actually, there was a few people up for Board of Ed, and it's not like one person versus one person. It's like 4 people and different people trying to get in, really. And we knew the agendas of every person running, meaning one person wanted to push the woke agenda, another person wanted to put push this agenda. There were actually 2 Russian-speaking Jews, former Soviet immigrants who came to run. One actually got in, and they were just like, listen, we just want to push STEM and forget about this woke stuff, My question is, it's easy to talk about the woke, but what about like the so-called rhinos? The people who just enjoy the status quo, the people who are, so-called Republicans and conservatives, self-styled, but it seems like they're just there to kind of like be a paperweight at a desk, or there's the school board meeting and they're just sitting there and they're just like the happy minority that doesn't really get to say anything, and then parents get to complain to the fruitcakes who are sitting at that dais.
Right.
And so the question is, like, I don't know about here, but maybe in Florida what's going on by your district in terms of the rhinos, again, because we know who the wokes are. That's obvious, but the issue is inside of our own camp. So it seems like to me.
Oh, Tzvi, you are singing my tune. Oh my gosh. No, the problem is that the Republican Party has basically sold us out because they're working with the woke, the Democrats, who have no problem pushing this agenda. And those people have got to go. Coming out of Tennessee, Williamson County, a very conservative, evangelical Christian community, we have a major problem with the Republicans, the rhinos. And we see even here in Florida, there's been some pushback against one Republican Ronald Reagan Republican organization that doesn't tolerate the rhinos in the party, won't endorse and won't allow rhinos to be part of their organization. And I just found out a couple weeks ago that the Republican Party in the state of Florida is trying to shut this group down because they don't toe the party line or the rhino party line. We have to look at not just the Democrat wokest people, we also have to look at the Republicans, and they all need to be replaced. There are more and more people we're seeing, and this is one of the things that we're working on as we launch our Taking Back America's Children initiative. We're traveling across the country, meeting with parents and citizens in communities, in counties, training them and equipping them to run for school board, to flip their school board. And it encourages me to see the number of people, like, for example, in Ohio, we've had one of the best responses with over 120 people who are running for school board across the state. And these are not woke ideology or rhino ideology people. These are people like you and I who get it. We are Trump supporters, and they're willing to do whatever it takes to get rid of these people because, again, their children are being abused. It's not only the propaganda that our kids are being subjected to, they're mentally and emotionally abusing our children with the whole, gender neutral ideology and all the other garbage that we see. They're not teaching our kids how to read, how to write, how to add and subtract. They're not teaching our kids how to think critically. They're pushing this propaganda on our children and making our children think this is true. And this ideology, and because you're white and you're a male, you are part of the problem. And these poor little boys who are growing up with learning this type of garbage in the classroom are coming home feeling like they're bad, they're evil. I mean, who does this to children? It's only people who have used psychology and sociology. I think Betsy's on the call. I saw her. She can attest to this. The emotional trauma that our children are having to endure, it's destabilizing our culture, our country.
Demons, they're demons. Lauri, can I say something?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that, I like what you're doing with the training program about getting people, to teaching people how to get on their school board and how to change things locally.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we've spoken about this before, and I got this term from Pam Popper, parallel economy. I know she didn't come up with it, but I heard it from her, so for the credit. I think that it's true without flowery language and without religious rhetoric. The educational institutions have been completely overwhelmed by real live, true demons, real demons. That's the kind of people who would do the things to the children that you were describing. That's what they are. And so in terms of, I think probably the way to go in terms of children is to remove them from this completely corroded institution of public education, and promote that as much as humanly possible. Like, save your kids, get them out of there. Maybe with charter schools or homeschooling, anything to get them away from these people. And for those who simply can't, to create some sort of like damage control, like education package. I mean, you're probably doing everything that I'm describing, right? I mean, because we've touched upon it in all these conversations that we've had. But I think the emphasis should be, get your kids the hell out of there. Just get them. It's too, it has to be done away with. The premise to begin with was a horrible idea. Obviously, it was put in place by, the devil himself, FDR. In order to get us to this point, like that's what
Right.
that's what the goal was. Before that, Americans knew how to read, how to write, how to count, and they knew more about civics before public schools came
Right.
onto the scene. So obviously its existence it should be the target, to really solve. And I'm not saying we have to, I'm saying that a parallel education system or economy would just organically dissolve it.
Yeah,
Probably.
my apologies, Frank.
No, that's it.
You're absolutely 100% right. I can tell you in Broward County, for example, I serve as a district advisory council member, and Broward County schools, they've got a major problem because parents have done just what you said. They pulled their kids out of the public school system, and now they're trying to decide what 10 schools they're going to shut down in Broward County. That means Broward County is going to have less money from the state and whatever federal government programs that they've implemented. So it's a very real concern, and you can see the school board members and the members of our district advisory council are panicking because they're losing kids. But again, parents are opting out. They're choosing to go by the way of homeschooling, even though they have no experience, which really that's what homeschooling is. It's not, hiring teachers, educators. It's us doing what we biblically actually are supposed to be doing. It is training up our children in the way that they should go. And, I grew up in Broward County schools. I'm a patriot. I love God. I love my family. I love my country. And I am horrified by what I've seen happen to the school district I grew up in. But what they're doing now, because it's just not Broward County, it's happening across the country where people are packing up after COVID. They're seeing what's happening, and they're seeing how their kids are being impacted and emotionally just destroyed. And they're deciding to undertake this for themselves. And what the opposition is doing now, some of these blue states are trying to regulate the homeschool movement in their states. Now they're realizing that they're losing all these kids, and people are exercising their constitutional rights to bring their kids home to educate them at home. And so now what do? They're going to try to figure out a way to pass laws so that they can go into the home. The homeschoolers have to get their curriculum approved by the State Department of Education. I mean, they're not going to give up without a fight. And we just have to, we have to fight even harder. And I remind people when they homeschool, as their kids get older, like in middle school, they need to start introducing their children to civics. And that means going and sitting in on school board meetings, going to the website of the school district and becoming familiar with the website and what are the policies of the school board. And then training, again, this is a great civics lesson, living it out, getting our kids involved. And I don't know if I shared the story years ago. I spoke to a group in Granbury, Texas, and there was a teenager. He was an 11th grader in the audience. And after I finished speaking, he came up to me, wanted more information about running for school board. And he said, could I run for school board being in school? I mean, he says, it only makes sense that a student should sit on the school board so that a student can give a perspective of the student. And I said, that's a great idea. Well, he ran for school board his senior year and in high school, and he won the seat. So his senior year and the first year of college, he served his school board on his school board, local. It was just an amazing thing to see a young man who decided to take matters into his own hands and run. So yeah, there was no age that, for school board members, so he got elected.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But you're
So
right.
it's terrifying what you're saying about, the people who are trying to, in the blue states, the people who are trying to remove their kids from the, from the hellish, demonic environment of public schools, right? And then now the government is chasing them into their homes and trying to regulate what's going on. So, I mean, the focus, the slogan should be do whatever it takes for your kids, do anything to protect your kids, move, get away from them, go to find a refuge where they can't reach your children. They're trying to put their dirty, disgusting hands on your kids, literally, and ideologically and every other way. So I saw a map yesterday. Somebody posted a map, the red and the blue, right? And it said, the red was obviously dominated the entire continental United States, right? And it says 97% of where gun ownership is in the red part of the United States. And then it showed, the blue dots on the coast and, little blue spots like inside mainland United States. And it says 97% of where the gun crime occurs. So in these tiny little places, right, in the United States, I mean, they look tiny on the map, relatively. That's where 97% of gun crime occurs, right? And in the red spots, no crime occurs, and that's where most of the gun owners, the legal gun owners, are. Okay, so I was always wondering, I don't think we can save the blue areas. We can't. I think we just need to let them rot. So if anybody has any sense at all, right, or has the slightest ability to do something for their children, they need to really. I'm a good like this. A lot of times I talk and people say, "Oh yeah, where are you?" Mr. But at least I could say this: I got the hell away from New York. I was born and raised in Brooklyn. I knew I had to get away from that hellhole, from that, and it hurts me to say that. I watch 80s movies, I see my city and I miss it. That's gone. It's gone anyway. And it wasn't that good to begin with. And people need to get away. They need to get away from the demons. Run away. Go to a place where they can't reach you.
Right. Yeah.
Can I say something also with regard to homeschooling? Because I homeschooled my children. Of course, this was 20 years ago, 25 years ago. And what I found in homeschooling was it was great, but at the same time, my children did need to know what was going on in the world. So what I did was I decided every year with the teacher and I was in California at the time, of course, very liberal there too. But at the time it was, a little bit more, we did have some say there, and the homeschool groups there were great. The curriculum, we had conventions where the curriculum was state monitored, and we had teachers that were over all of us. I belonged to a group of about 250 families. And so I decided each year whether my child would be in school or wouldn't be in school. I had 3 children. So one year, maybe one would be in. And it all depended on whether it was a Christian teacher or not a Christian teacher. And then I knew that they would get something foundational. If it wasn't, then I wouldn't put it in, and I'd homeschool them. And then I'd work as a noon aide there so that I would find out what was going on in the school. And many times I was actually given the opportunity to share something with the teachers and the principals at I asked for permission. I said, look, you're teaching on this. I think you should hear the other side. Will you give me the opportunity to share with the teachers? And they said, yes. So they gave me an afternoon, a lunch with the teachers, and I was able to share the other side of the story. I'm not going to share what the story was, but anyways, I got to share. And then as my children got to high school and they wanted to try high school, I let them go. They hated it. They were in about a year. And then I decided, instead of going to the homeschooling groups for the curriculum, they had a program in the school, in the high school, where you could literally get the curriculum of the school, state mandated curriculum, use that curriculum, take my children once a week, and they would go once a week for 1 hour, meet with the teacher who was over them. They'd get a packet, A, B, or C, and then I'd be able to see what they were actually teaching in the school, and then be able to counter and give to my children both sides. Now, where I'm at today, and my children are 38, 30, 39, and 45, and all of them are in a place where they know both sides of the story. I always say, I would tell them, this was one of my favorite things to tell them is, look at, as long as you know what the game is, play the game, get through this, and do what it is that you need to do to live in this society, but at least you know you're playing the game, and they don't know. So there's a way to get in, and I think it's really important that that the children know. The other thing is this: there are many Christians out there who do not know. Of course, I'm Jewish, but there are many Christians out in the schools today, and I'm seeing this even here, that are getting fed all this rhetoric. They're against, and I'm in a good state right now, right? I'm in Idaho, and they are getting the anti-Semitism. If we don't feed them books or inform parents and inform just any Christian that are in these groups that are anti-Semitic, what's really going on? Let's say like the book that was introduced yesterday, In Jewish Blood, and we know that's been out for a while. If they didn't even have that book to explain exactly the history of what's happened in Israel and who's behind everything, then they're going to go along with the rhetoric of what's being passed through the media. That's all they know. And now I'm here, and I'm invited to Christian groups. And when I'm there, I sit and I listen, and they're sharing all their stuff, and I'm fine with that. But they will ask me. They'll ask me what I think. And it's an opportunity to share, here's what's really going on there. The other thing is this: what's really going on in Israel, right? After being in Jerusalem for 13 years, there was a gentleman from Israel Pundit. I know probably, Ari, you know who he is? Ted Bellman.
Yep.
He teaches on the curriculum there. He did many times. He had many meetings on the curriculum there. And in Israel, they're just as ignorant about anti-Semitism being taught in the schools there. Israel proper, East Jerusalem being taught. These Palestinian children with their books are being taught to kill Jews that were monkeys, and on and on and on. And when I went to those meetings, I was like, how is the government allowing this to happen in Israel proper? I was like, I don't understand this. So we shouldn't be surprised. Our part is to inform others. If we have this information, take advantage of the fact that you can guard your children. We can't. Well, one of the pastors says, "Oh, what are you going to put your child on the altar of the world?" And I said, "That's not what I'm doing. I'm giving my child both perspectives so my child can make an educated opinion, the decision to believe or not to believe. What's the real history here? We need real history. We can give it to our children, and we can give it to others who have children. So that's our responsibility. And that's kind of just what I wanted to share. It's very advantageous to have homeschooled, to be a homeschooler, and to help others who are homeschooling grandchildren, children and grandchildren that are, because I have grandchildren now that have been homeschooled. All of them are educated on both sides of the affairs. And my daughter just says, she had somebody at her work tell her about what was going on in Israel. And she says, "Oh, don't say that to my mother." She'll give you a real history lesson on that. So it's very advantageous to all of us to pay attention to the curriculum, to be aware of what's going on, to not just pull our children out, to go and to see if it's best that you pull your children out, but make an educated decision on that. Because if we allow this to happen in the schools, we are going to see a lot of horrible things happen to Jews around the world.
Yeah. Adi, thank you for saying that. And I just want to remind everybody If you haven't gone to our website at pjtn.org, there is a media page, and we have over 100 episodes of our Focus on Israel show. Those programs and documentaries about Israel, they're targeting a Christian audience. However, even our Israel Indivisible documentary, we had members of the Jewish community watch it, and they said it's bar none the most amazing film that talks about the history, Israel's historical, archaeological, legal, and biblical rights to her ancient homeland. So I want to encourage you all, those resources are there for free. And if you're homeschooling your kids, there's a topic, it's only a 30-minute show, but there's a topic that basically covers almost everything. And we just got back from Israel back in May, and we were filming more episodes post October 7th. So there's going to be more information that you can share, not just with your kids, share with your homeschool groups, your families, your friends. If people want to know how to approach this, and again, because we target a Christian audience, I understand that there's still a lot of anti-Semitism in Christianity. It's replacement theology, it's supersessionism. And so we produce all of this with that in mind, to try to get people to start thinking, I hadn't thought about it from that perspective. And does the Bible really say that? Because we use a lot of texts of scripture, especially in the Tanakh, to help bridge that gap. So it's there for your use, and it's for this purpose, actually, that we created all of this. Because unfortunately, as we all know, people are just illiterate. They're not going to read a book on this topic, but they will sit down, because we're such a media-driven culture. They will sit in front of their computer or in front of their TV, and they will watch a program or a documentary to learn more, because you're entertaining as you're educating.
Well, we've come to, hold on,
Lowell.
Frank, we're at 8 o'clock now, but go ahead, because got to conclude the recorded
We
section.
just need the link. If you could post the link, please, to the website, that would be great.
Yes.
Lauri, I just wanted to say, while you're doing that, this is a very complex problem, and it's been bad for a long time. So we obviously, the main thing that we all need to understand is that it's, regardless of all the hard work we do, it's going to take an absolute, open act of God. So we have to keep recognizing that it's only God that is, after all the hard work we do, that He's going to come in and He's going to have to fix this. And so that's prime. And also, in terms of education, the Torah teaches people, really. I mean, it tells the Jewish people, but it applies to all of mankind, that that it's the parents that are supposed to be the teachers, not a stranger, not even an aunt or an uncle, but the parent. That's what God wants to see. He wants to see the children go through day-to-day life with their parents, and the children learn how to be, the skills that they need, information, education, and how to be a good person while watching and assisting their parents in their craft. That's the ideal education system. That's God's education system. So as close as we can get, and so homeschooling, I guess, is as close as we can get to that. And if I can just slightly disagree with the young lady that was just speaking, that I understand it's important to give a perspective or both sides of a story, but that's also up to the parent to do, to be as objective as possible and to deliver that information. Because when you give your child to a stranger and they spend all day with that child, they form a bond, and it does interfere with the parent's influence and the ability of the parent to teach the child. And creates a conflict in the child, and you really God gave you your kids, and you really don't know what other people do to them. Like if you're not there day to day, as long as those kids are under your home, in your care, I just look, I went to public school, and I just don't know. Like I remember what it was like, and I can't imagine handing my kid over to anybody else.
We coming to the end of time. Tzvi is continuing his recording, and then at a certain point there'll be a discussion non-recorded. So just about happy, so happy that Frank and Tzvi could co-chair. Betsy is here with us, but we don't see her. The three co-chairs of the seminars, and we thank Lauri for being our guest, our monthly guest, and she's back again. And we thank it's not really a studio audience, it's a panel who join us regularly from around the world for these discussions. I would just add that, no, I don't agree. First of all, in order to present both sides of a story, it requires a level of knowledge on a subject matter that most of us, including myself, don't have. And if my child was coming home from a course on the Holocaust in World War II, no, it's not my obligation, even if I understood it, to present the National Socialist side of the story. There are plenty of National Socialists to do that. They don't need me. And the same thing with the PLO or well, why do Wahhabis want to cut your head off? Okay, I'm going to give you an introduction to you tell the truth as you have to. The enemy is well funded to present their stories. They don't need you to present their sides of the story, and it would require such a knowledge of the issue that most of us don't have. That's one point. The second point is, in terms of popular education, there's a wonderful movie called 1776, made in 1974, where William Daniels plays John Adams, one of my heroes. And in a form of a musical, the person who, it's wonderful, it's very historically accurate, but it's also in an entertaining way where people can really learn about the history of the revolution. And the person, John Adams, I know he fell down with the Alien and Sedition Acts afterwards. He was very sensitive to criticism, but he was the engine driving the Declaration of Independence. So I wish Mr. Schneller of blessed memory showed it to us in our history class. I cried in the class and tried to make sure no one else could see.
Can I tell you something? Lowell, can I tell you a little factoid? In 6th grade, we're talking 1992. At the end of the year, this is like I'm graduating elementary school in Brooklyn. My 6th grade teacher he was also the chorus, he ran the chorus of the school, and he made us watch that movie for fun or for education. And then at the end of the year, he wanted to put on a musical. He wanted to put on that musical for the school. And actually I was supposed to play one of the main, either Jefferson or Adams, I don't remember who. It was going to be like singing. It was crazy because I was in chorus, whatever it was. And then we never got to do it because it was already, the school year ended, and that was it.
Well, that will have to wait for the future, because when we're done destroying the Erev Rav and Amalek worldwide, and they will be destroyed because this is the third and final war. If anyone doesn't see that, I can't help them. We have 500,000 Ukrainian men dead in 2 years. And the people think, Hakol Beseder? America lost 500,000 men and women in all the years we were in World War II. The British lost 240,000. And then 40,000 Russians dead, but everything's fine. I want to know who's living in La La Land. If anyone doesn't see that World War III is underway worldwide, then you need a brain repair. And it's going to get worse. And yes, it is the final wars of Gog and Magog. Read Ezekiel 38 and 39 with the commentators. We're in it. I would rather not be in it, but none of us are asked. One final word about that. In my favorite film, The Lord of the Rings. And it's in the book too. So Frodo, who was the ring bearer, says, I wish none of this had ever happened. I wish the ring had never come to me. And Gandalf said, and this is pure biblical, Judaic, rabbinic philosophy, so do all who find themselves in such times. But that is not for them to decide. The only thing for us to decide, for you to decide, is what to do with the time given you. If anyone, they can't argue with that logic because it's true. It's beautifully put. Anyway, so I have to conclude the recorded section because there are 4 grandchildren to go to sleep here. And I wish I could participate further in what will be recorded in the non-recorded sections, but I have to do some of the putting to sleep. So I will see everyone next week. We have Lala Pringsheim from Munich with her colleague from Germany, our Professor Bhakti from Kiel up northern Germany is talking to Lala in southern Germany about microbes and viruses and all these issues that relate to the global mass murder program underway now. So we're so glad to have them and looking forward to seeing Lauri next month at the beginning of August, God willing. We're all walking through the bullets everywhere. And we will, again, from Churchill, King George VI, who was a genuine anti-Nazi, and his daughter, who, what happened to her at the end, they all get corrupted as they get older. She was a good girl. She wanted to be in the British Army. They didn't leave London. Buckingham Palace was bombed. Churchill didn't leave London. Once he was driving down one of the main streets and a 500-pound bomb hit the road about 100 feet behind him. That's courage. That Israel's about to enter a Battle of Britain situation right now, in which probably Israeli cities will be bombed from north to south, as English cities were bombed all the way up to Scotland, to Glasgow and Edinburgh. That went on for 10 months with 50,000 dead and 5,000 children killed. But they didn't leave. And so Churchill says, and France fell May, June 1940. He has 3 speeches from when he becomes prime minister till June 18th, France is finished. He said, we will go on to the end, whatever the cost may be, if necessary for years, if necessary alone. Why? In a situation right now, for all the free peoples of planet Earth, under assault by hominids, humanoids, and killer apes being imported in from 20th world countries. For without victory, there's no survival.
Yeah.
That's happening now. All right. So shalom from Florida, from New Jersey, from Florida, and from Jerusalem. And you all come on back now. You hear like in the Clampets, a wonderful TV series from the 60s. I stopped watching TV in 1974, not because I had any objection to it, because I went to college and didn't have a TV. So all the programs I referred to were in the 60s and 70s. You know, the good ones like the Munsters and the Addams Family and Hogan's Heroes. There's a lot of them. They don't make them like that anymore. So see you then. Okay, I'm done with the recording for me. Let me assign